Okay, we're going to do Daf 8 and 9 and finish the third perek. We begin with the Mishnah, very interesting Mishnah. It says, B'shalosh kupot shel shalosh sein tormin et halishka. So people would donate their machasita shekel. They would keep it in the main treasury house, big basket. And then at 3 times of the year, a Kohen would go in and fill up 3 smaller boxes with the money that they would actually use. He'll go and take that, and he'll take it to the farm and buy animals and buy oil and flour and wine, everything that they're going to need. So people donated way more than they would actually use. So he has 3 smaller baskets. Each of these small baskets is 3 se'ah big. A se'ah is about 2 gallons. So then each one would be 6 gallons. And to distinguish between the 3 baskets, they had written on them, one was called Aleph, Bet, and Gimel. That way, when you go and use them, you're going to use Aleph first and then Bet and Gimel, so you remember the order that you actually collected them in. That's the first opinion. The Bishmel Omer, Yevanit Ketuv Alehen, Alpha, Beta, Gamma. Bishmel says they're written in Greek letters, right? A, B, and C in Greek. This is really fascinating because it shows us that people were more comfortable in Greek than in Hebrew. Nowadays, you go to like a JCC anywhere, they write everything in Hebrew to make sure to have Lashon HaKodesh. But in the Bet HaMikdash, and remember, this is not for the people that are coming and donating, so they'll never know which one. This is the Kohen who's in charge of the treasury, who's going to be withdrawing, and for him, he wants to have Alpha, Beta, Gamma, according to the Bishmael. Okay, so that's really interesting. Ena Torem Nichnas, Lo bepargod chafut velo beminal velo besandal. The person who's collecting the funds should not go in with a garment that has cuffs or long sleeves, because you don't want him to be suspected of hiding one of the coins right in his cuff, a magic trick. And also not with shoes and not with sandals. Maybe he'll stick a coin in his shoe, and so we want to be above suspicion. This is strange because you're not allowed to go on Harabayit with shoes at all, shoes or sandals. Nowadays, those who go up to Harabayit, have to wear non-leather shoes. So why do we have to even say this? Perhaps it's coming to add, even if it's something not made out of leather, even like socks or something like that, don't wear any footwear, anything on your feet, because that's a place someone could hide it. Also, velo betefillin, velo bekameya. Now it's tefillin, and now it's an amulet. Here's an ancient shoe. An amulet was a scroll written on parchment and would be placed in a little pouch, and then the person would wear it around their neck. So this little pouch would be easy for someone to hide a coin in. So you can't wear an amulet. Also, not tefillin. Tefillin's interesting because the tefillin, the way we make it today, is totally sealed up. It would be very hard to hide a coin in there. But tefillin in Greek and in English, we translate as phylacteries. Phylacteries is a Greek word that means something that protects you. In other words, for those that translated, they thought of tefillin kind of like an amulet. Obviously, it's not. It's not there to do any magic or to protect you. It's there to remind you of the Shema and the commandments. But their construction might have been somewhat similar. We don't have any from the times of the Tanaim. We do have Dead Sea Scroll tefillin, and they do kind of look pouch-like. So anyway, we don't know exactly how it looked, but maybe it wasn't sewn up so tightly as ours are today. Or maybe they would just stick it under the tefillin, and then it would be a good hiding place. Therefore, the Kohen doesn't wear any of these things. Why? Maybe the person will become poor. That Kohen who collected the money, his business will go bad, and people will say, "Oh, it must be his business went bad because he stole some coins from the Bet HaMikdash, and this is his punishment." Or maybe he'll become rich and he'll have a good business that year, and everyone will say, "Oh, he must have stolen some coins from the Bet HaMikdash." No matter what, this guy, people are always going to suspect him because he has access to all these, a huge amount of money. So therefore, it's like someone works in a bank. They have to be checked. We want to make sure, even if you trust him, you don't want anyone to even have a suspicion of him. A person should always be blameless before his fellow man, just like he should be blameless before Hamakom, before God. You should be pure, right, free of sin before God and Yisrael. The context of this pasuk is that Reuven and Gad said, we want to stay on the eastern side of the Jordan River and not go in with the other tribes. And Moshe said, okay, but only if you promise that you're going to come and fight and conquer the land with us, and then you'll go back and settle the land. So they said, we promise. Moshe says, okay, if you do that, then you'll be clear, guiltless of your obligation before God and man. So they had the obligation both to God to help out and to their fellow tribes. So we learn from there that one should always have that as a goal. Another pasuk from Mishleh that we should always find grace and good understanding in the eyes of God and of man. So that's great musad, that person should always be above suspicion, both in the eyes of God and the eyes of one's fellow man. All right, that's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara is going to go into a comparison with Shabbat. We're going to go into some of the sizes, shiurim, of different measurements. Taman tanena mefanin afilu arba v'chamesh kupot. In Masechet Shabbat, we learned the halacha in the Mishnah there that, let's say someone has some students over and has giving a class, and then more students come, right, and he doesn't have enough room in his apartment. So, but he has a storage room that's full of boxes. Are you allowed to remove the boxes to make room for the students to come and sit? The answer is yes. Even 4 and 5, you shouldn't clear out the whole thing. The point is, there's no melacha here. You're not carrying or anything, but you shouldn't do excessive work on Shabbat. And so this would be work to have to carry all the boxes. So you are allowed to carry some boxes, but not all boxes. And the question is, well, how much? How big is a kupot? Can you carry these giant things that you need a lot of people to carry? That would be like work. If it's small, it's okay. What's the size? It doesn't say in the Mishnah in Shabbat. So he answers using hours. Amar leh, nilmod satum min hameforash. We can learn something where it's hidden in Shabbat. It doesn't say. From here, where it does explain exactly how big a kupa is. It's the same word. Betanya b'shalosh kupot shel shalosh sein shehen tisha sein. So the kohen in machasita shekel would take 3 kupot. Each one is 3 se'ah big. Right. So therefore, that altogether 3 times 3 is 9. Right. 3 kupot. Each one's 3 se'ah. That's 9 kupot. 9 se'ah altogether for one collection. And you had 3 collections during the year, one in Nisan, one before Shavuot, and one around Rosh Hashanah time. Shehen esrin v'sheva sein. 9 times 3 is 27. So during the whole year, they'll collect 27 se'ah. And so here we learned that a kupa is 3 se'ah. So back in Shabbat, if some extra students come or lots of guests come, and you can move things away, if it's 3 se'ah, which we said is a 6-gallon box, then you can move them away. If it's bigger than that, then that's considered much work to do on Shabbat. Now, once we quote the Baraita, we can continue the rest of the Baraita that says, it's written in Hebrew, Aleph Bet Gimel, it's written in that order so that you know you'll use the money from the first box, the one that you collected from first, Aleph, and then Bet, and then Gimel. Good. Haman Tanenan. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about shiurim. We have another Mishnah in Masechet Shabbat said, Hamosi yayin kidem bizigat takos. This is a good review for back in Masechet Shabbat. Now, when for carrying on Shabbat, there's a minimum amount. If you just carry a tiny amount, it's not allowed, but there's no liability. So various items, depending on what's considered something that's useful or important, that's the minimum amount in which one would be liable. So how about carrying wine? The Mishnah says enough to dilute in a cup, to make 1 cup of wine, right? So in general, they would dilute 1 part wine and 3 parts water. So that would mean 1/4 of a cup. If you carry 1/4 cup of wine, that's considered an important amount, and it'd be someone who carried that much would be chayav. So one time, this rabbi asked his colleague, his teacher, how much is the amount called a kos, usually a revi'it? Italki. He's going to learn it from Pesach. This is so fantastic because this is actually the daf of yesterday, right? So we have the 4 kosot right on the second night, second day of Pesach, when we drink the 4 kosot. So it says a braita that how much do you have to drink for the 4 kosot? Altogether has to be a revi'it of Roman wine, of Italian wine, meaning pure wine. So if you have a revi'it of wine and you take a quarter for each cup, diluted with 3 times that water, that will be enough for 4 cups. So altogether, the whole night, you have to have 1 revi'it of wine, but diluted, split into 4 and diluted. So now we see that a kos, the definition of a kos is a revi'it. Revi'it means a quarter. It's called a quarter of a log. A log is about, let's say, a liter, and this is a quarter of it. So about 3 ounces, 3 or 4 ounces for us. Amar Rabbi Yosef bar Avin mishum Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yehuda, this opinion that you just said is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. How do we know? The Taneh, we have a beraita. Mayim kedei gimiyah. What's the minimum amount of water that you'd be liable if you carry water on Shabbat? Enough swallow full. Rabbi Yehuda omer kedei lashuf behen takilot. It says even less. Enough water to make a rubbing, a medicine for your eye. You take some powder, you mix it with a few drops of water so that you have this salve for your eye. In other words, even a few drops, which is much more machmir than a swallowful. Yayin kidei gamiyah. Wine also, there's 2 opinions. One says a swallowful. The Yehuda is the one that says enough to mix with water and to dilute it so you'll have a cup. So how much is that? Now we know a full cup is a revi'it, and you need a quarter of that for wine. That's the amount that you'd be liable if you carry. So that's what the Mishnah said, and now we know from this baraita that is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Mazug bekama. What if you're carrying wine that's already mixed? What's the minimum amount of mixed wine, diluted wine? We can learn it from the following. We're going to quoting the same baraita. Yain kedei gimiyah. Rabbi Yehuda omer kedei mizigat takos. Adamara mazug kedei mizigat takus. From the same baraita, we can derive that, at least according to the Rabbi Yehuda, wine, if it's already diluted, you have to at least carry a full cup of it, right? But it really doesn't matter if it's diluted or not. If it's pure wine, then it will be a quarter of it to be eat. If it's diluted, the water just mixes with it, and then you have to carry a full revi'it in order to be liable. Kama shiuran shelkos, Rabbi Abin Amar Titron Urbiya. We're asking the same question again because different rabbis lived in different times and places in which they were more familiar with other types of measurements. And so the revi'it is also equal to a Roman measurement called titreton. Tetra, this is like from tetra in Greek, means 4 or a fourth. It's a quarter of some kind of Roman amount, which is a little smaller than rabia. So titron urabia, 1 1/4 titrons is the same as a revi'it of a log. Mahu lishtotan bekerech echad. Okay, more Pesach laws. We should have done this before we had the seder. Are you allowed to drink all 4 cups at once? You want to drink them one after the other, right? And not wait throughout the whole meal. Is that permitted? Well, we can derive it from here. The Rabbi Yosef said that the Hallel, if you heard it in Bet Knesset, like we do, we say the full Hallel during Arbit, and then we say it again. Why don't we say it twice, by the way? It comes from Tosefta. A lot of people, they didn't have Haggadot, printed Haggadot. They didn't know Hallel, right? And no one knew it by heart. So for those, they would have to go and find someone that knows it. Otherwise, there's nobody around on your block that knows it. So in Bet Knesset, sometimes they would go back, eat it, and then come back to Bet Knesset. That wasn't practical for a lot of people. But for people that don't know it, they said, read the whole Hallel in Bet Knesset with the Chazan, and then you go home, and then if you don't know it, you'll still be okay. So that's what he means here. Hallel, if you heard it Bet Knesset, you fulfilled your obligation, and you don't have to say it again with the Haggadah. Obviously, if you know how to say, you should say it again with the Haggadah, because that's the main place. Not everybody knew how. Anyway, we can learn from here. So if, let's say, you said it in Bet Knesset and not at home, that means the third the third cup of wine, you said Birkat Hamazon. You don't know Hallel, so you're not saying it. So you say have the fourth cup right next to it. So third and fourth cup, you're drinking back to back with no separation, and it's okay. You're right. So if we learn from there that actually you could drink all four cups in one shot, and you'd still fulfill your obligation of 4 cups. Obviously, we like to spread it out and give each cup a mitzvah that it's associated with whether it be Kiddush or Magid, Birkat Hamazon, and Hallel. Okay, opposite question. Are you allowed to drink the 4 cups with separated, right, with interruptions? Either it means, spread apart like we do, or maybe drink it slowly, kind of sip it. Not clear which one it means. Well, the answer, the whole point is to drink it, not to get drunk. By drinking it with intervals, then you won't get drunk, right? You have the meal in between. So certainly it's fine to drink it separated over time. Another question: during the Shavuot year, you're allowed to take grapes that grow that grow by themselves. But once there's no more grapes in the field, then you can't store any grapes in your home, and you can't have them anymore. Anything you have in your home, you have to put out back in the field. In other words, it's free for everyone, so you can't hoard anything. So if you have wine that's made from Shavuot grapes, are you allowed to use that for the 4 kosot? So if it's talking about a case where there is lots of grapes are still in the field, then obviously it would be allowed. That wouldn't be a question. Must be talking about a case where there's no more grapes in the field, so you really shouldn't benefit from it and store it in your home. Is it permitted? We would expect to say no, yet it's allowed. Yes, you can. The reason seems to be that there's a principle that mitzvot lav lehanot nitnu. Mitzvot were not given to us for our personal benefit, but rather for our spiritual benefit. And so since we're not getting personal benefit from the Shavuot by drinking wine, because we're fulfilling a mitzvah, therefore it's permitted, right? So you can't take Shavuot and say, oh, I love this wine, I want to drink it for fun, but for a mitzvah, it's permitted. Okay, can you have this dessert wine? It's like spicy wine. Well, we have a beraita that says, yes, the sweet wine is like wine, and therefore, yes, it's permitted. So this would be a good source, like eating grape juice or Malaga wine, if you like that. How about diluted wine? Are you allowed to use that for 4 kosot? Yes. It's not live, or straight wine, or diluted, as long as it has the taste and appearance of wine. This happens a lot of times. Some people they want to have grape juice or whatever. They mix it with water. That's fine. You can do that as long as it's not just a few drops of grape juice with water and it looks pale and doesn't even taste like grape juice. Then or wine, that's not allowed. So you're allowed to dilute it, but not too much. You should use red wine. It's preferable over white wine because Pasuk Mishlei says, do not look at wine when it's red. The point of the Pasuk in Mishlei is to stay away from wine. Don't get drunk. It's not good. Alcohol is not good for you. But we learn from that wine is called, the definition of wine is red, and therefore that's the best thing to use. By the way, if you remember, we had this whole series very similar in Masechet Pesachim, Daf 109, and here this is in the Yerushalmi parallel to it. Some things are a little different, but a lot of it's interestingly the same. Taneh mebushal kim tubal. There's a braita that says wine that's boiled, right, mebushal yain, is like spicy wine. Now this braita, we don't know the context that it was said. It could have been said in the context of sacrifices. If you bring wine with the sacrifice, you can't bring cooked wine, and so similarly you can't bring spiced wine, meaning like dessert wine. It has to be just regular. Okay, so some people like to be machmir and use non-mevushal wine for kiddush. Okay, so that seems to be the context. Now let's sit bayan mevushal. How about for the 4 kosot on Pesach? Can you use boiled wine? Amar Rabbi Yonah, Yosin beyayin mevushal. Yes, you can. Rabbi Yonah letamed, Rabbi Yonah kad havat shater ba kaset lepischa hava chazek resha ad haga. And by the way, we can learn this from the fact that we said you can use spicy wine, and here the Baraita says cooked wine is the same. So they're both permitted for Arba Kosot, even though they're both prohibited to use for Korbanot. And now we have a story of Rabbi Yonah, and when he would drink the 4 kosot on Pesach, he got such a headache, he had to wrap his head in a bandage until Shavuot. He had a headache for 7 weeks because of it. So therefore, he said it's permitted to have a boiled wine. It's a little bit less intoxicating when it's boiled. It's a little bit weaker. So that's, I guess in the future, that's what he did. Now this Rabbi Yonah, we have a story about him, funny story. One time, this Roman noblewoman, not Jewish, probably not Jewish, she saw Rabbi Yonah and his face was glowing. He had a glow. She said, Amra Sabah Sabah. She said, this old man, must be one of 3 things happened to you. That's why you're so happy and glowing. Or the maybe you're drunk, or the malveh or you lend with interest, and that's easy money, so you're getting very rich, or the megadel chazireat, or you raise pigs, also a business where there's a high profit margin, but they're bad businesses to do. That must be why, because you make easy money, or you're drunk. Rabbi Yonah said, may that woman literally blow up. May her wind cause her to blow up, or they translate here, let the spare come upon that woman. So he gave her a curse. I don't have any of those. I'm not drunk and I don't deal with those businesses. But rather, I had a good day of learning. My learning is, I remember everything I studied, and that's why the wisdom of a person lights up his face. So you got it all wrong. All you understand is materialism. Right, I am happy from my Torah study. A similar story. Rabbi Abu Atel Tiberia. Chamone Talmidoi to Rabbi Yochanan Apoy Nehorin. Rabbi Yochanan, the most important sage of the Talmud Yerushalmi, who lived in Tiberia, and he had his students at school there. One time, Rabbi Abu came to visit Tiberia, and the students, Rabbi Yochanan's students, saw Rabbi Abu that his face was glowing. Amarun Talmidim the Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Abahu Simeh. So the students said, it must be Rabbi Abahu found a treasure. He must have won the lottery. That's why he's in such a good mood. Rabbi Yochanan knew better. Rabbi Yochanan knew that had to do with his Torah. So when he saw Rabbi Yochanan said, tell me, what new Torah did you learn? That must be why you're so happy. And in fact, that was the case. He found and learned as ancient Tosefta. Tosefta means a collection of Baraitot, and unlike Mishnah, basically everybody knew the Mishnah by heart, but collections of Baraitot, there were lots of different ones, and not everybody knew them. He came across this collection that was very ancient, very old traditions, and he was so happy that he was able to learn it, so he was glowing. He quoted the same pasuk in that regard. Okay, great story. Since we mentioned the word atika, now they're going to see another teaching with the word atika. Amar Rabbi Chanin, loga deoraita timunata atika de moraisa de sipori. Back to the weights and measures, the log of the Torah, when the Torah says a log, that is equivalent to the 8th measurement of old. We used to be used in sipori by the fishermen to measure fish brine. Okay, that's how big it is. Amar Rabbi Yonah says, yes, I know that. I used to use that. I remember that measurement. Because Rabbi Yonah in his house, they used to measure honey in that 8th measure. So he knows exactly how big it is. An 8th measure in Tiberia, that's the same amount as a Revi'it. The old one, not the one that they use now, but the one that they used to use. Yochanan says, oh, that's the one that I use today. So why do they call it the old one if Rabbi Yochanan still uses it in his own day? Well, there's different answers. So some say because it was originally small and then it became big, other became smaller, but not as small as it used to be. So you see that in different places and different times, sometimes the same name was used for different measurements. So the rabbis wanted to get it right. That's why they gave very specific explanations of that one that they used to use that some people still also use, but for other places it got bigger or smaller. Okay. Back to the cost. How much is a cup? Rabbi Yosef b'shem Rabbi Yosef ben Paziv Rabbi Yosef bar Bevai b'shem Rabbi Shemuel. Etzba'ayim al dum etzba umechesa ushlish etzba. So we know a cost is a revi'it, right? We said that already. But actually, how much is a revi'it? So if you want to change from a fluid measure to a volume measure, you can do it as follows. If you make a box, 2 fingers by 2 fingers by 1 1/2 and another third. In other words, 1 5/6 finger breaths, right? 2 by 2 by 1 5/6 finger breaths. That gives you 7.7 1/3, I think. So 7 1/3 cubic finger breaths. That's how much a revi'it is. This is very interesting because if you remember back in Pesachim, in the Bavli, we had a long discussion about this, and there it came out to 10.8 cubic finger breaths, right? 10.8 rather than 7.3. It's almost 50%, it's about 50% bigger. So the revi'it in the Yerushalmi is much smaller. So I don't know if you're in Israel and you have a smaller cup for Kiddush, maybe you can follow the Yerushalmi. I don't know. Ask your local rabbi in Yerushalayim. Okay, but that's pretty interesting. Tanen yavesh kezayit Rabbi Natan. It was sort of Rabbi Natan said. Okay, Rabbi Natan said that wine that's dried out wine. It's like congealed. Now you can't use a fluid measurement, but rather a solid measurement, and also like for carrying on Shabbat. So how much is that? A kezayit. Like any food, the minimum amount is a kezayit. The rabbis in Caesarea and Caesarea. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi bar Bevai b'shem Shemuel. Atya the Rabbi Natan ke Rabbi Shimon. This statement of Rabbi Natan, who says congealed wine is a kezayit, he follows the opinion of the Tana, Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon amar b'revit, ken amar Rabbi Natan b'revit, lech sheikaresh yebo kezayit. Because he also said as a revit, but when it gets dry, then it will be a kezayit. Okay, Rabbi Simon, Hashem Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi Maseh, Pirudat Rabbi Shemeta, Tiharu et Dama Mishum Nebela. It seems to be a famous case because you can see it's repeated even in the next generation. Rabbi Simon, of course, is the same as Shimon. In Greek, there's no sh, there's Simon. Simon is the same as the Greek form of Shimon. So this rabbi, he went by the Greek pronunciation. And the name of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. One time, the Rabbi Nasi had a mule that died without kosher shechita, and therefore it's a nevela. So a nevela we know is tameh if it's a certain amount, kezayit, usually of flesh. But what about the blood? There was certain, and he said the blood is tahor. Okay, so right, they said that the blood is tahor. Now, question. Shal Rabbi Eliezer et Rabbi Simon. This statement was said by Rabbi Simon in the name of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. So another rabbi, Rabbi Eliezer, asked Rabbi Simon, in that case, how much blood was there that they said is tahor? Is it less than a kezayit, less than a revi'it, and that's why it's tahor? Or even more than a revi'it? Is he saying all the blood of a nevela is permitted? How much was it? He wants to know the halacha. Ad kaman. So Rabbi Simon ignored his question. Not very nice. So then Rabbi Eliezer went to his teacher. Now, only up to a revi'it, that's why it's tahor. If you have more than a revi'it of blood, then certainly yes, it would be tameh. Rabbi Elazar was upset at Rabbi Simon because Rabbi Simon ignored his question and he had to go to Rabbi Simon's teacher. Okay, interesting story. Now, another similar story. This is like a generation later. Rabbi was sitting and he was recounting this law that the bee's mule died, and they said this blood is tahor. אמר לרבי יצחק בר כהנא, עד רביעי טהור, יותר מכאן טמא. Rabbi Yitzchak asked, what, is it only until רביעי that's tahor, more than that is tameh, or is it totally tahor, even maybe all blood is of a nevela is tahor? Uba'at be. Rabbi Yitzchak kicked him. He kicked him. He kicked Rabbi Vai. So why did he kick him? Amar le Rabbi Zerika. Another colleague was sitting there, Rabbi Zerika, and he asked, he asked you a question, you kick him? What kind of response is that? Why'd you do that? Amar le begin to lahavadati be. He says, no, because I was, my mind was not with me. I was worried about something else entirely. And that's why I kicked him. He's coming, interrupting me with this technical question of something that happened a generation ago, but I was preoccupied. It wasn't meant personally. What was he preoccupied with? Well, it was about finances. Pasuk in Devarim, that has all the kilalot, says, you will, your life will hang in doubt in front of you. What is that? Who is that referred to? Someone who doesn't have a field and doesn't have a regular means of production and has to buy a year's worth of wheat every year, but who knows if he'll have enough money next year to eat. So he's always worried about his future finances. And the next part of the pasuk says, you'll worry day and night. Who does that refer to? This is someone who only buys enough flour to have for the next day. He has no idea what he's going to eat 2 days from now. So he's always worried day and night for the next day. And the third part of the pasuk says, you will have no assurance in your life ever. This refers to someone who's so poor that he has to buy from a baker. In other words, he eats hand to mouth. He just works for a few hours, he gets a coin, and he eats dinner from that, whatever he made that day. If he doesn't get a job that day, then he starves. So this is the worst curse. A person has no idea where his next meal is coming from. Anyway, this Rabbi Bevai said, Ana samechna apaltor. I have to rely on the baker. And so that's why he was so worried when Rabbi Yitzchak came to ask this question. He was worried, like, am I going to have enough money for dinner tonight for my family? And you come and ask me this technical question about the amount of blood. So he kicked him. He says, okay, but I didn't mean it. That's why I kicked you, not for any personal reason. Okay, interesting story to record. Umahu kedan. Right, well, it's a good lesson, right? Don't always take everything personally. Maybe someone is worried about something else, and that's why they get angry sometimes. So what? And anyway, what's the answer? Well, in Masechet Eduyot, it actually says there that according to Yoshua ben Levi, the blood of a nevela is in fact tahor. And what does that mean over there? Mahu tahor, tahor medachshir, aval letamot metameh. The word tahor can mean two different things. It can mean tahor medachshir. That means like if you take an apple, pluck it off a tree, and it touches a dead body, it's still tahor because the blood was never wet. The apple never became wet. If the apple becomes wet, then it's prepared that it can be susceptible to tumah. Not only water, but also 7 liquids, including blood. So the question is, what kind of blood? So everyone agrees that blood that comes out of an animal, right, when you do shechita, comes out of the neck, that blood, if it touches food, makes it susceptible to tumah. What about other blood, right? Is that also yes or no? So that's the question. So they're saying that here, yes, the blood of a nevela will make something prepared to receive tumah l'hashir, but it does not actually itself carry impurity. So according to that, even more than a revi'it of blood would not itself be tameh and would not impart impurity. It only works to make something else wet and machshir l'tumah. So that's the opinion here. Taman tanenan. A question on this distinction, right? We just said that blood of nevela can prepare food to become tameh, but it's not tameh itself. But we have a Mishnah in Machshirin that says blood of a sheretz, of one of the 8 creepy crawlies, like a dead mouse. The blood of that mouse is like its flesh. It's mitameh. It could cause tumah, but it does not prepare food by making it wet to receive tumah. And it says, "Ve'en lanu kayoseh bo," and there's nothing else like it. So if you say here, there's nothing else like it, that means this is a unique law for a sheretz, and nevela would not be like this. So ve'eno machshir. So this is a question on what you just said here, that because what we just said is, I think I said the opposite before. Let me correct. Regarding nevela, we said tahor means tahor milachshir. It will not make something prepared to receive tumah, but it itself does become tameh, right? So regarding nevela, we said a revi'it would actually be tameh. Therefore, in the cases before with the Rabbi's mule, only less than a revi'it would be tahor. More than a revi'it would be tameh. And the Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, when he says tahor, it means that it will be tahor melachshir. It doesn't make anything else tahor. But here we learn that that's the law for sheretz, and there's nothing else like sheretz, which means that only sheretz, so nevela must be a different law. How are we going to answer that? The answer is that when the Mishnah over there says there's nothing else like a sheretz, they mean the amount, because a sheretz makes something tameh even if it's the size of a lentil, and there's nothing else like that. Not tumah of a dead body or anything else. So in fact, it can be similar in the sense that both of them can carry tumah, but neither of their blood can cause something else to be mukhshar l'tumah. All right. Regarding this matter of blood of a nevela, there are actually two opinions. One says tameh, one says tahor. The Amora that says tameh follows the Tana, the Biuda. Mandama tahor Rabbi Yoshua ben Petora, and the Amora says tahor can follow the Mishnah, the Tana and the Mishnah that says tahor. These are found in Masechet Eduyot, where it does talk about that case. Abduma demin nachota v'yaut. Rabbi Yehuda moraina debe nesiya hava. And Rabbi Abduma says, you're right, this makes sense, because after all, Rabbi Yehuda is the halachic authority for the house of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And that story all the way up above was about Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and Rabbi Yehuda, different Rabbi Yehuda, ruled that if it's less than a revi'it, it's okay, but more than a revi'it is not okay. And so you see, this is consistent with what he says over here. The one who says tameh is in fact Rabbi Yehuda, the fourth generation Tana. Okay, this is, by the way, very interesting. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, even though he's the highest political authority, has a posek halacha above him that decides the halacha for him. So I think that speaks well of him, that he was humble enough to accept the halachic authority of a different sage that was greater. Okay, and now next section, Shema Ya'ani v'yomeru. So remember, the Kohen, he goes in and doesn't wear any extra clothing or any amulets to make sure no one suspects him. Someone who has big curly hair should not be the Kohen to go in, because maybe he'll take a coin and hide it in his hair. And not only that, the treasurers would untangle the locks of someone's hair who did go in. So, check his hair, make sure, it was like, TSA pat down, make sure he's not hiding any coins. One time someone patted my kippah, make sure I wasn't hiding any bombs under my kippah. Now they suspected, what if he hides a coin in his mouth when he goes into the treasury? So to make sure he wasn't doing that, they would talk to him the whole time. Make sure he's speaking the whole time. If he's talking the whole time, he can't stick something in his mouth. Okay. So have another way. They could have filled his mouth with water before he went into the treasury, and then when he comes out, he spits out the water. So if he has water in his mouth the whole time, there's no way he could hide a coin in there. No, when he goes in, he has to say a baracha. He's doing a mitzvah that he's making a withdrawal of the machasita shekel. So he can't make a baracha with water in his mouth. Instead, they would just make him talk the whole time. Okay, Rabbi, we're going to end the pedic with some agadah. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman b'Shem Rabbi Yonatan b'Torah b'nei b'Ketuvim masan she'adam tzarich laset yedei b'riot kederech shu tzarich laset yedei hamakom. So we learned this principle that a person should be blameless both before his fellow man and before God from sources in the Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim. We already saw in the Mishnah 2 of them. But Torah regarding Moshe and Bnei Gad and Reuben, he said, right, go and fight with us and you'll be blameless. But Nevi'im This is talking about a case later on when the 2.5 tribes on the eastern side of the Jordan, they made a big monument. And the rest of the tribes like, what is this big monument making? Now you're following idolatry? You see, you live outside the land, and now you're following your allegiances to foreign gods. So they come and confront them and threaten war, and they say, no, we believe in Hashem, we believe in one God, we're with you. We made this monument to remind ourselves that we are with you. Okay, so then they made peace. So you see, the Yisrael, so first they have to be blameless before God, and Yisrael hu yada, and Israel also will know, right? So even if their intention was good, if the other tribes suspect them of bad, then it's also not good. They have to be blameless. The pasuk from Mishlei that we saw. The question is, which of these 3 pasukim are the clearest? Is the clearest? They should be guiltless before God and man. This was like an absolute promise that they made, and you have to make sure to fulfill your obligation completely. And so that's the one that's the clearest of all 3. All right, last Mishnah. We saw this already that the answer of Ben Gamliel, he's a Nasi. Whenever the Kohen would be scheduled to go and make the collection boxes, the Ben Gamliel would bring his coin between his fingers so everybody could see it and know why he was going in, and he would throw it in front of the Kohen who had the collection box, and the Kohen, he would make sure to put that in, and you push it into the kuba. He wanted to make sure that his coin in particular went into box number 1 and would specifically be used for the communal sacrifices. And he didn't do it just in private, when no one was looking. He made a big ceremony out of it because it's a happy time. And so the Kohen who was taking out the box, he would say, hey, look, I have a box. Should I do it? Everybody would say, yeah, do it. They made it like a rally, and everybody would answer 3 times to make it more of a public spectacle and celebration. So remember that the people donated from Adar until Nisan, and they did one collection. Once they did that one collection, they covered that big basket with a leather cover to say, we already collected from this. And then people that donated after that, they put into another big basket until Shavuot, before Shavuot, and they collected 3 little boxes from there and covered it with leather, because that was already collected from. So now that's like, this is leftover. And from the next time, we would only collect from anything new. That way, they knew that they collected from all 3 batches of what people sent in. Why they cover it? Because maybe you'll forget and not remember which one is the latest collection. So it covers it, say, oh, we already used that one. And he had in mind, the first one would be for Israel, because they live close by, so they would be able to get their shekel in within the month. And the second one he would have in mind for all the cities that are nearby, because they got theirs in within the next few weeks. And the third collection was for Bavel and people that live in distant countries. By the time it could take a few months before they got their money in. Okay, Gemara. Shel bet Rabban Gamliel, idu ayu shene kerayim, v'taram me'echad mehen al chavero, shema lo patar chavero. A simple question. Let's say I have 2 piles of produce. I want to take terumah. So I can take terumah from one and have in mind, I'm taking terumah for both of them. I don't have to take from both piles. So this is a challenge to the Rabban Gamliel. Why did Rabban Gamliel need his coin to be in the small collection box? If all of us, we all give coins, the Kohen who takes from the big box, he has in mind all the coins. So it doesn't matter if your particular coin was chosen or not, you still have a share, an equal share in the communal sacrifices. So why does the Rabban Gamliel have to go and make sure that his coin gets in there? The answer is Anachat Ruachi Lahem Shelo Yeh Korban Mitkarev Ela Mishalahen Techila. It was a satisfaction, personal satisfaction. He's a Nasi, he can do it. He knows that his coin will be in the first box and actually will be used. So, all right, we give him that honor. Taneh, Shamatet Ketab Liot Nasu Kulan Shirayim. What if they forgot to cover it? And now we don't know which of the baskets was used already, was taken from already, and which one is the new one. Well, in that case, you have to consider all of them like remainder. Anything that's a shirayim, that's a remainder, you use that for an upkeep of the Bet HaMikdash, for buying extra korbanot, for cleaning things. Right? So use it for shirayim, and you're not going to use it for the communal sacrifices because it was used already. Okay, so now you don't know, so they'll have to assume all of them are used. Taneh, Shilishit hi hayta ashira shebekulan shiyu ba isteriot shel zahub v'darkonot shel zahub. The last collection, the one that comes from all the countries outside, that'll be the one that's after Shavuot, right? Until Rosh Hashanah. That was the richest. That was the most money because the people that send their money from far away, remember, it's too heavy to carry all the machazit shekel. They would exchange it for smaller golden coins. And so you had, so when the Kohen takes a volume of 3 se'ah and collects from it, those are going to have a lot of gold coins in it. So that was worth a lot more than the collection from the first one, which was mostly the machazit shekel itself. Haneh, Taramet Harishona l'Shem Eretz Yisrael l'Shem Kol Yisrael. Shenia l'Shem Kirachim Ukafim l'Shem Kol Yisrael. Rishit l'Shem Bavel, Vadai l'Shem Medinot Rechokot l'Shem Kol Yisrael. Rabbi Naitai says basically the same thing as the Mishnah. It just adds a little bit that the first collection would be for those in Israel and for all of Israel. The second one was for the nearby cities, like maybe Damascus, and for all of Israel. And the third one would be for Bavel and for all of Israel. So all three had all Jews in mind. It's just that we make specifically because most of the coins in each collection will be from those places. And then not tell me Narishona for Bisha Yesh Berishona, no tell me Nashenia. Not tell me Nashenia for Bisha Yesh Berishona, no tell me Nashilishit. Okay, so let's say now he has 3 boxes, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, or Alpha, Beta, Gamma. So he takes some of the coins from the Aleph box. And before he finishes that box, he takes a few coins from the Bet box. And before he finishes that, he takes from the Gimel. That way he ensures that he'll take some coins from each. Because if he takes only from Aleph and then only from Bet, he might never get to the third one. And he wants to make sure to get to all of them. Then after he does that, he empties out the third one. Then he goes, Chozel HaSheniyah. He uses the second one. If that second one gets empty, then he goes back and finishes off the first box, collection box, Chozel Lishonah. If he emptied all 3 collection boxes and he used up all the money, maybe he underestimated, maybe the prices of animals went up. So then he'll go back to the chamber and he'll collect more from any new coins that came in since the last time he did. Okay, I just said he goes and gets the new ones, but not everybody agrees. Rabbi Meir says he can go back to the same big box that he already collected from. It doesn't automatically become leftover and you can't use it because he has in mind, I might need to use it again. The Meir says that if let's say someone would take for himself some of those coins, he would commit me'ayla. You only commit me'ayla for something that's kocheh kodashim. So when the coins are dedicated for the communal sacrifices that are kocheh kodashim, then one would commit me'ayla. Once they're leftovers and you're only going to use them for upkeep of the Bet HaMikdash, they're not kocheh kodashim anymore. You're still not allowed to steal them, obviously, but it wouldn't be that as harsh as me'ayla. So since we know that Rabbi Yehuda says that the shirayim, the leftovers, is still called me'ayla if you take it, so you see that he thinks because we may have to access them again to buy more animals for Kodesh Kodashim for the communal sacrifices. So according to the Meir, you can go to the same big box that you already did to collect them again. Okay, now we end the Perek with a very famous Baraita, very famous Agadah. It's famous because this is the basis of the Mesilat Yesharim by Ramchal, if you ever studied it. The Ramchal didn't get it from here, he got it from a parallel in the Bavli, but similar. Nikiyut mebi'ah lidei tahora, tahora mebi'ah lidei kedusha, kedusha mebi'ah lidei anava. If someone is very careful in the performance of mitzvot, they do everything right away, meticulously, then they will come to be clean. I think we're bringing this here because of the idea of cleanliness, that that Kohen, he makes sure to have nothing on him so no one will ever suspect him. He has to be naki. Okay, so he'll be clean of sin. Someone's clean of sin all the time, and he's pure. Not just in a sense of kavan tahara, but in a spiritual sense. So it's pure all the time will be holy. Kedusha is holy, right? And that's an attribute of HaKadosh Baruch Hu also. So he'll realize that his Kedusha, he's so small, and he'll have humility before God's holiness. And when he's holy, he'll realize how simple, how lowly he is, and he'll be afraid of sin. He's afraid of sin, he'll be pious. If he's so pious, he'll have access to the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh. And if he does that, he can bring resurrection of the dead. And resurrection of the dead will bring Eliyahu to come. Now, actually, it's the wrong other way. Eliyahu comes before Mashiach comes, before Tichat Metim. But the point is, when he fills the world with Ruach HaKodesh, and therefore is worthy of Tichat Metim, Eliyahu will come the day before to announce it, to announce the redemption. Okay, so that's the Braita. We're going to go through each one and just bring a pasuk to prove it, and that'll end the perek. Zidizut me'ba'al nikiyut tichtib v'chila mikaper. So this is regarding the Kohen on Yom Kippur. It says he finishes and mikaper. So you see that when he's careful with all the process, then he will bring atonement, and atonement is purity from cleanliness from sin. Regarding a woman who requires a childbirth, woman in childbirth who gets tareh, who becomes tahor. So it says if he does kapara, meaning cleanliness from sin, then she becomes tahor. Back to Yom Kippur, he makes it tahor and then he makes it kadosh. Once you're tahor, and you can become kadosh. So you see here that Hashem is called holy, and what do we see? God's holiness and the fact that he cares about he who is crushed and humble in spirit. So we see here that Kedusha leads to humility. When once you have humility, that leads to fear of God. Yirat, which is also the same as fear of sinning before God. If someone is yareh, then he'll also become a chassid. And this pasuk in Tehillim, Chasidut biladei Ruach HaKodesh yachtiv az dibarta bechazon lachasidecha. God speaks to those who are pious. So there you go. That's Ruach HaKodesh. Ruach HaKodesh biladei tichat metim v'tidochi bachem v'chitem. This is Yechezkel when he sees the dry bones, right? And he says, "I'm going to bring spirit in you and bring you back to life." That's Ruach HaKodesh brings. Eliyahu will come to announce the day before the great day of redemption, which is the same as the day of Tichat Metim. כל מי שקבוע בארץ ישראל ומדבר בלשון הקודש ואוכל פירותיו בטהרה וקורא קריאת שמע בבוקר ובערב מבוסר שבן העולם הבא הוא. Beautiful Agadah to end. Anyone who lives in Eretz Yisrael, speaks Hebrew, and this is maybe connects with the first Mishnah that did they write in Hebrew or in Greek letters, and eats of the fruit of Israel in betahora, right? Make sure to always be in the state of tahora, like Kohanim would be, and reads Shema in the morning and at night, then that person can receive the good tidings that connects to Eliyahu and the Navi who brings Yesodot Tavot. He will be guaranteed that he has merited Olam Haba. Adran Alach, Perek Bishtosha, Perakim. Hazakim uberuchim.